Hi everybody, welcome to History Dad. Today we're going to talk about Enbridge Line 5. What is Enbridge Line 5? Well, Enbridge Line 5 is an oil pipeline that runs from Superior, Wisconsin through the upper peninsula of Michigan and then down the lower peninsula of Michigan till it gets to the Detroit area where it hits a refinery. Then it merges with another pipeline, moves on, and continues on to southern Ontario. It is a Canadian company, Enbridge, and it runs from Western Canada back into Canada. It does supply propane to much of the UP, and it does provide jobs in Detroit at the refineries. Okay. When the line was built in 1953, it was an engineering marvel. It was very special because when the line gets to the Straits of Mackinac, it goes underwater. It splits into two pipes. It goes under the Mackinac Bridge, along the floor of the straits, up the other side, and continues on its way. It hits a depth of 290 feet. This was a marvel because that is an incredibly hard place to build anything, especially to keep a line on the bottom like that. The currents change hourly. They're very strong. The weather conditions can be harsh, especially in winter, so forth. When that line was built, it was intended to carry 300,000 barrels of oil a day, and it was intended to last 50 years. Today, that line is moving 540,000 barrels a day, and it has been 64 years. The line, when it was built, had several stipulations for the easement. One was it had to have supports every 75 feet. Two was it had to be inspected regularly. At the time, they wanted the exterior inspected every 2 years, the interior every 5 years. Since then, a new law has gone into play a couple years ago that required them to inspect the exterior and the interior every year. A third party does the inspection. As of the last inspections, they say the interior of that line is immaculate, everything's okay. Well, the National Wildlife Federation sent some divers down a while ago, and they found a couple things that were off. One thing they found is that the 75-foot supports, some of them were missing. Not there. Okay, I can understand that. That is a very difficult place on anything. Some of the supports failed. Enbridge went down. They said to replace those supports. Everything is fine now. They also found that the line was covered in debris and tiger mussels. This is important because tiger mussels were never figured into the original engineers' schemes. This is a new invasive species in the Great Lakes, and when it latches onto something, it secretes enzymes. Those enzymes are known to dissolve steel, to dissolve all metal. Okay. Another thing that has been discovered based on Enbridge's own reports is that in 9 separate spots, the steel of that line is thinner than it's supposed to be. They're not worried about this because they believe it's been that way from the beginning. When they originally made the line, the technologies were not as good as they are today. They don't think the line was ever completely up to spec, so they're not worried about that. Everything seems to be fine. Okay, so last year, U of M did a study. They did simulations to think of what would happen if that line burst. They used 3 numbers. They did it with 5,000 barrels being leaked, 10,000 barrels being leaked, and 25,000 barrels being leaked. The first 2 numbers they arrived at because Enbridge states that the worst case scenario for them is if that line burst, they would leak 8,583,000 barrels. Yeah, 8,583, yeah. Okay, so that explains the 5 and the 10,000 estimation. They did the 25,000 barrel estimation because Enbridge Line 6B ruptured in the Kalamazoo River in 2010 and released 25,000 barrels of oil before they shut it off. It seemed like a good number to try just in case. The thing they were surprised at U of M is how little difference it made between the 5,000 barrels and the 25,000 barrels. What they determined was if there is a leak of any of those magnitudes, there will be 720 miles of shoreline at risk, along with 17,238 square miles of open water. Most affected area would obviously be Mackinac, the island, the city, anything in that surrounding area. But depending on the currents at any given moment, the effects could go as far as Traverse City in one direction or Port Huron the other direction. Now, I will say Enbridge is doing what they can. They have shut-off valves at both ends, manned 24 hours. They have specialty boats there ready to do cleanup, whatever they can do. But it's in a very difficult place to work. If, for example, something happens in winter, which, as everyone who lives near the Great Lakes or in a winter environment knows, that if something's going to break, it's going to break in winter. Well, if that happens, it's been acknowledged, the Coast Guard has said, that nobody's going to be able to do anything there until a Coast Guard cutter gets up there to break that ice for them to start working. Depending on where that cutter is, they said it could be as long as a week, maybe a little longer, before they could get a cutter there, before anybody could start doing anything. Either way, if there is a rupture, it is going to be a catastrophe. It is right on the site of several wildlife preserves. It is in the area that the native tribes in the area use for fishing, which is a large portion of their income that could well be destroyed. The damage to the tourism economically in that area is incalculable. Okay. There are a lot of things that would be horrible about doing it, not the least of which is that we're talking about the Great Lakes, which is the largest freshwater basin in the world. We're not just talking about some water birds or some fish. This affects everything living on the planet. This whole pipeline, it's a little bit of a hot point. It's become in the news lately. Bill Schuette, who's the Attorney General of Michigan, and a person I do not always agree with, stated that if this were to be brought up, we would not allow it to be built today. So how many more days will we allow it to operate? I agree with him wholeheartedly in this scenario. Things break. Enbridge Pipeline 2 was completed the exact same year with the exact same technologies. This pipeline failed a couple years ago. The reasons cited were age and damage to the wells. This pipeline was not at the bottom of one of the most tumultuous areas of the Great Lakes. This was not a pipeline that had mussels crawling or growing on it that damaged steel. There is a lot of reasons why this pipeline could burst at any time. It would be an ecological disaster of ridiculous proportions. The reason I'm bringing this up is not so much that I'm intending to be an ecological activist, although I'll tell you it's not a bad thing to be. Why I'm bringing this up is I'm a historian. One of the reasons that we always cite why people should study history and learn history is so you don't repeat the mistakes of the past, so you learn something from what happened before. We've all seen oil accidents, whether it was the Exxon Valdez or the Gulf of Mexico. We've seen what happens. We're in a situation now where we can see on the horizon a potential ecological oil disaster. When the Kalamazoo River, when that pipeline burst, it cost them $121 billion, and it took years to clean up. And that was in a river. That was where you knew exactly where the oil was going. There was a bank on the left, a bank on the right, a river. It was going that direction. This is the Great Lakes. And this is in a very, busy spot of the Great Lakes. That oil is going to spread drastically in all directions. And the question of if it will break is a little bit silly in my mind. Everything breaks. nothing lasts forever. The pyramids, all right, they've lasted a long time, but even they're eroding, all right? And I don't think the pipeline was built quite as sturdily. The thing is going to give. It's a matter of when. I would like to think that we are smart enough to see this. It is a matter of seeing the mistakes we've made in the past and learning from it. I don't have the answers, but I do know that it is not in Enbridge's best interest to come up with the answers. It is not profitable for them. That's not really what they're in the business of. They make enough money and are insured well enough that if something goes on that pipeline, they'll be able to pay for it in their mind. That isn't really good enough for the rest of us. We have an opportunity to prevent a major disaster. It may not be the most economical thing to do right now. It might not be the most politically expedient or easiest thing to do right now, but I kind of think it's the right thing to do. I think it's good for us to look at the past, see what we did wrong, learn from it, and actually prevent that from happening again in the future. All right. That's pretty much all I have to say at the moment. I'm starting to feel a little preachy here, and I've gone well over the 10-minute mark I usually try to shoot for. So I'll stop here, and as usual, I think everybody should get up, go outside, get some sunshine, do something fun, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.